In the previous clip, you bound the item source property of the list view to the customers property of the customers view model. The list view has a selected item property, and you bound the text property of a text box to that selected item property so that the first name of the selected customer is shown in the text box. But this data binding here is actually a bit of UI logic in SAML. The view model that should contain the UI logic has no idea which customer is selected in the view. So the question is, how can you bring that selection logic into the view model class? Instead of this data binding, you can create a selected customer property in the view model. Then you can bind the selected item property of the list view to this selected customer property. The selected customer has a first name property, and you can bind the text property of the text box to the first name of the selected customer. Now the selection logic is in the view model. The view model knows which customer is selected. Now in this demonstration, let's do this and let's add a selected customer property to the view model. Let's switch to Visual Studio. Here I've opened the Customers View Model class of our project. Now let's use here the prop snippet. Let's press the tab key twice and let's insert a new property of type customer, and let's call that property Selected Customer. As this property can be null, let's add a question mark after the customer type. Now let's go to the Solution Explorer and let's bind to that property from the Customers view. So let's scroll down in this view to the place where the list view is defined. Here on the list view, let's bind the selected item property. Let's create here a binding to the selected customer property of the view model that is in the data context. So when this property is set, the selected item property of the list view is set, and when the selected item changes, the selected customer of the view model should be updated. So the binding needs to work in both directions. So let's define it here as a two-way data binding. Now let's continue here with the first name text box. You don't have to set the element name property anymore. This also means that you can remove the xName attribute here from the list view. Now, as a path, you have the customer's view model in the data context, and you can bind to the selected customer property, and from that one, you grab the first name. Now, as you know already, if the path property is the first property that you set on the binding markup extension, you can also omit it. So let's remove here path equals, and let's write directly selected customer.firstname. Now let's also bind here the last name text box and the isDeveloper checkbox. To do this, I just copy from here this data binding with the text property. Let's paste it for the last name text box, and in this case, let's bind to the last name of the selected customer. Now I paste this property also here for the checkbox, and here the text property does not exist. Instead, you want to bind the isChecked property of the checkbox. Let's bind this property to the isDeveloper property of the selected customer. Now let's run the application and let's see if everything works. Let's select the customer on the left side, and you can see first name, last name, and I am a developer. So now you can browse through these customers and you see all the details. In the next clip, let's implement the logic for this add button, and then you will see that our selected customer property has an issue.